at previous conferences. I think the last time we spoke was maybe 2 years ago, was it?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And you spoke about the importance of emergence. And this year, the theme for the Creativity and Culture Conference this year is presence, emergence, and impact. So how about if you begin by telling me what your approach is to emergence and how that connects with presence and impact as well?
Sure. And I'm sure, like with most people, it's a longer story than I can fit in here, but generally, it actually is in that order. Presence first, then emergence, then impact. And so first, my approach to it is either seeing a need or feeling a call. And so presence is a big part of that, because it's becoming self-aware, becoming aware that there's something calling to emerge. I approach emergence from a very organic perspective whether I'm working with individuals or organizations, that there actually is a need, there's something to emerge. And so doing a lot of presence practices first to learn how to become present is one of the first things. And then you begin to feel what wants to emerge. It's sort of like in nature when, you're pregnant and something wants to be born. I always say, my approach with emergence is, I'm the midwife, not the nanny. I help new things become born. And so somebody has to feel some kind of stirring, or an organization to want to create something new. And then my approach, and I know people work with this in many different ways, because of my background and focused a lot with whole brain, whole person creativity, my approach is cultivating what is calling to emerge through various whole brain, whole body, embodied practices. Getting out of our conventional habitual thinking into thinking differently, exploring differently, going through a discovery process, a cultivation process. I use a lot of organic process words because I feel like it is really an organic process. And then that can take anything from a couple sessions to months to years, depending on what somebody is creating or what wants to emerge. And then, and it's refining along the way. And then in my particular approach, there's always some sort of impact or some sort of tangible outcome. So first we go into divergent space, explore, cultivate, bring forth what's calling to emerge. And then we go into convergent space to ground it, make it practical, put structures around it, models, systems, processes, approaches, next steps. So it goes from very abstract to concrete.
Okay, so that's the process that you follow when you're doing your trainings and your workshops. And when people are not actually at a workshop or a training, their presence, nevertheless, regardless of whether they are conscious or unconscious of it, their presence does lead to an emergence of many, like they create a stimulus for many things to happen around them. And many of those things are unplanned, they're unforeseen. And
right.
Yeah, and so it's about responding to the feedback created by these emergent features, isn't it?
Absolutely. You certainly don't need someone to guide you through a process to go through your own emergence. I think that is it. It's being present lets you respond to impulses. It lets you respond to what's going on outside of you and inside of you, and lets you observe and lets you see patterns and make connections. And whether it's something that you want to create or a problem you want to solve or something you're called to move toward, you do that. Presence is the foundation, becoming present. And then you just sort of follow, emergence has a life energy, its own kind of trajectory. And when you begin to follow your curiosity and follow what's alive for you and follow what you're curious about, or even follow where your resistances are. I know one thing that happens to us all in emergence is something called natural resistance, because you even see it in nature. As soon as something new wants to emerge, you'll feel the resistance. It's sort of like the chick, you know, the eggshell over the chick before something wants to be born. There's a dynamic tension as the chick is poking through the egg to be born. So we all often go through this laborious process. And so I would say the key, when you start to feel something very alive and start to follow your curiosity, is to recognize resistance when it shows up for what it is, that it's just part of you wanting to maintain the status quo, part of you wanting to maintain the status quo in a dynamic tension with the part that wants to create something new.
Yeah, it's a little bit like stepping off of that cliff into the unknown.
Yes.
There is that resistance, isn't it? I do remember you telling, using that metaphor of the chick, the resistance of like just before it's born. And emergence is about delving into the unknown, into that unknown territory, isn't it? So it's untrodden territory. So there's bound to be some fear, because there is risk involved.
Yes. When you go into the unknown, there's bound to be fear, resistance, confusion, distraction. It can show up in so many different ways. Sometimes it just shows up in getting distracted with other things. People, I would say one of the greatest fears is the fear of the unknown. And so people will try to fill the unknown with something known, even if it's more painful often. And so one of the biggest keys to transforming the fear of unknown to at least to helping make it navigable is change the fear into discovery, or change the fear of uncertainty into discovery. And so it still means you're in the unknown. It still means you're in uncertainty. You don't know what'll happen. But when you develop a discovery mindset and heart set, you open. You go from contraction to being open to whatever is around you. And as you go into discovery, you start to make actual discoveries. And then you get little knowns along the way in the bigger unknown. And then that's when it starts to feel a little bit more safe and secure.
And I suppose we need to have both courage and confidence for this discovery process, don't we?
It's certainly helpful. I will say courage to do it anyway. They say courage is feel the fear and do it anyway. So I would say courage, yes. Confidence, I think, is helpful, but certainly it will develop as you go. So even if you are afraid and don't feel confident, if it's more, I would say commitment's important. I'm going to commit and stay with the discovery, even through the fear and through the doubts and through the lack of certainty and through the places I don't understand. It's sort of like the commitment to discovery or the commitment to something emerging can act a little bit like an inner compass in a storm or a fog. It keeps you going even when you're not seeing it. Through that, as you make little mini discoveries, you definitely, for sure, develop more confidence.
And through this process of discovery, there's, creatives can make things happen. They make connections and they create things out of nothing, as it were.
Yes. Oh, yeah. It seems like it's creating it out of nothing, and it's really creating it out of the unknown. It's the void. What people are terrified of the void, but the void, I've discovered just over the last 20 years of working with this, is really filled with a lot of untapped creative potential. It's filled with dreams, visions, ideas, hopes, aspirations. And sometimes because there's no laid out path in the limited choices we see in the world, people aren't sure how to walk through it. But when we, I look at it as, that creative source, that creative life energy trajectory that everybody has, that thing that brings something into animated life. If we begin to become present to it, become connected to it, create with it and start to co-create with it, whether it's through journaling or drawing or painting or embody body-centered practices or theater type practices, as we begin to connect more with it, we begin to have more faith in it. And so then it goes, we see that inside of us exists a real, alive, creative part of us that actually has a trajectory and a direction. And when we create with it, the unknown becomes more known, and it becomes more accessible and less fearful. It's kind of being resilient when you don't know versus frozen.
And a lot of people seem to think of presence solely in physical terms. And as you were talking, it kind of reminded me that presence is not just about the tangible, the physical that we can see. There are also many invisible presences that people can tap into. Metaphysical presence, symbolic presence, so there's all sorts of dimensions to this presence, not simply the physical, right?
Yes, I that was beautifully said. And there are many different ways to access it. I know, having spent over 20 years doing improv theater, one of the things I noticed in improv theater when I was first starting out is I would, after doing all the improv games and practices, I would be as present, centered, present to what was happening in the moment, not looking ahead, not going behind, after years of meditating. So there are practices to help you connect to the presence. And to answer your question around it being tangible, I think it is very tangible. I think that's part of what the mindfulness is about too, is everything, just being present to what is happening. And that can include, the metaphysical, the energy within you, your thoughts, your awarenesses, your impulses. And what I like to work with the most, the parts that bring you alive, the parts where you desire to do something, you're excuse me, you have aspirations and you want to follow them, but you might not know how. And so a lot of people leave them on the shelf. And the idea is it's okay to not know how, just start wherever you are. And that's in the moment, being present. And you could start dialoguing with it. There's so many prompts, there's so many ways to get in there. But I think being present and not closing the door on what truly inspires you and brings you to life is one of the main keys to creating a fruition for your emergence.
Yeah, so when you use the phrase like bringing you to life, it kind of, that seems to be at the emotional level, which is, we can argue that that is totally being present physically. And then there's that psychological, the mind presence, or being alert, being aware, being, tuned, intuitive as well. Is that like that intuitive, like the presence that we feel of symbols and all sorts of metaphysical things on an intuitive thing, even though we can't see those, we can't see what we're feeling the presence of.
Right, the presence of, so it's intuitive, energetic. You might feel energies. You might have visions of symbols. Oftentimes, if people, there's so much research, and it's happened to so many people, and it's happened to me. You might have dreams that give you insights and awarenesses. And if you're present to that dream when you wake up and you start to write it down, or you start to, presence is in a way giving something space, giving something attention. So yeah, I think the presence to symbols, presence to feelings, presence to energies, presence to impulses, and presence to really what's going on. And also presence in when you're listening to somebody, instead of it receiving everything they might say, does this resonate? Does this feel right to me? What parts do, what parts don't? So presence also offers a healthy discernment, you know, in the process.
Yeah, because a lot of creatives, they have been inspired by dreams, and you know, so the dream creates an emergence of maybe actions that they've taken based on this inspiration or the driver of the dream that they have very vivid in their imagination, and that makes an impact, and the impact has through the feedback loops, it transforms them.
Absolutely. I know a lot of inventors, scientists have used their dreams for guidance, or use their dreams to actually create or discover something. You know, the DNA helix, the guy dreamed of, you know, the double snakes coming together. And there's so many stories of how dreams can be used. The presence, again, I think the difference isn't that, you know, a lot of people say, oh, I'm not creative, or I can't do that. I think the difference that I've discovered in working with so many people is not who's more creative, because everyone's creative in their own unique way. And that's the beauty of it. People create infinite ways, but who trusts and follows through with their creative inspirations. It's not the capacity to be creative, it's almost the presence to honor what is emerging and follow it, and the willingness to follow something, try things, and they may not work according to plan, and that's the discovery mindset. So you try it, and rather than go into a polarized binary pass fail, oh, that didn't work, I failed, just go, oh, that was an iteration toward what will work. And so it's kind of bouncing back and using things that don't work out as planned as iterations toward what can emerge. Because what you said at the very beginning pointed to a very significant part of the emergence process, is that something unknown and unexpected does emerge. You know, the whole comes together to create emerge something greater than the sum of its parts. And it cannot be completely predicted ahead of time. I think that's one of the main tenets of emergence in the way I use it, and the way the sciences use it. The outcome can't be completely predicted ahead of time, but yet it's still directional.
And what is surprising is that sometimes entrepreneurs who've created very successful businesses will say, I'm not creative, but they are, because they've created an organization, they've created success and added value. And so I suppose when people say they're not creative, it's just to do with their definition of creativity. What they're really saying is, I can't draw, or I can't paint, you know. So that's, you know, it's a linguistic issue. So we're talking about emergence. And again, like in the entrepreneurial sense, we can start a business, but we just don't know how the external environment is going to respond to our invention. And so that's where it's so important to have that skill of dealing with the emergence. So for example, the coronavirus pandemic, that is, in a way, it's equalized the platform for a lot of people, because everyone is subjected to this being forced to work in different ways, dealing with the emergence of new situations, new policies, new rules.
Right. And so if you're very set to the way things are, and the way, you know, it's supposed to be like this, and you're if things working according to plans is where you get your security, it's a lot harder than if you embrace a more adaptable, responsive, adaptive mindset, because we're all in Corona. And so what you see are all, you know, it's undeniably challenging and devastating for many people. But for other people, it's an opportunity to really get present, start asking themselves the questions. It's almost like a pause, a space, an emergent space, to start exploring, well, how can I contribute? How can I serve? There are a lot of people suffering. Is there something I can do? If I were to create a business, what would it look like? If I were to create, what kind of mission or service or product or offering might I do? It really offers us an opportunity. And knowing that as you try things, you can put them out there and you'll start to get feedback. What works and what doesn't work. You'll get feedback from the outside world for sure. And I think it's also partly it's important to also talk about staying true to your inner feedback. Because sometimes, I know this was true when I was first starting my business, and I see this with a lot of people when they're first starting a business that may not fit so conventionally into the norm. Sometimes you put feedback out to the wrong people and they'll shut it down and people will get discouraged. So sometimes it's even in the face of adversity or in the face of other people saying, I don't think that'll work. If you have that inner life force, if you have that inner drive and you're present to it, you'll keep going even through other people's resistances. And so I think it's important to note that as you are shaping or creating a business or some sort of structure in the world, to first of all pick your pick your team carefully, or who you're going to share it with carefully. Pick it with people who they won't put their fears on your what you'd like to create, that they can hold an open space with you as you discover and explore it. And then know that just because you try it one way and if it didn't work out perfectly doesn't mean it can't be modified, or doesn't mean there's not another audience for it.
I'm sure you're familiar with the hero's journey, where the hero goes out on this voyage of discovery and comes back transformed, and they're transformed in a way that they no longer fit in that society that they originally left. So that's another aspect of emergence as well, that you're saying, like, you need to be discerning and find the spaces and the networks and the people who are supportive, because a lot of emergent features are not going to be beneficial, and sometimes luck has a lot to do with it as well. Somebody who is facing the coronavirus pandemic in the middle of New York, right in the city center, what's emerging there will be very different compared to what's emerging in the countryside, where there's a lot of space and nature. So, we have to kind of be discerning in terms of knowing that we need to be willing to move, perhaps, from one space to the other.
I think that is probably the most significant point. Is one of the things that I think is the signature of any emergence process I've experienced it, is that your inner landscape changes and who you are, your inner way of being changes to accommodate the emergence. When something new and different wants to emerge, or is calling to emerge, or something more expansive, we often have to bump up against, just like in the hero's journey, some of our inner dragons, our inner resistances, our shadow side, and our to expand in to be able to carry out what we need to carry out. And often, I don't know that this is true for everyone, because everyone's journey is so unique, but I know in mine and many people I've worked with, sometimes we have to try things out that absolutely don't work. And we learn what works by knowing what didn't work. Oh, okay, it didn't work that way. I know I just did a workshop and I took a whole bunch of risks. I tried so many things out. Some of them worked amazingly and some of them did not. And so it's just oh, all right, if I do this, or next time I do it this way. And so I think a lot of it is not looking at things that don't work out as failures, but as seeing them as invitations to create what does. And that process is an inner excavation. So where we have to unravel our fears, our belief systems, our assumptions from society. Society is designed, a lot of it, for maintenance than actually to be exploratory and discoverers and explorers. And so that's why I say pick your support team carefully, because you want people who can nurture and nourish your emergence. Like a garden, they bring it more out versus seeing something that's unfamiliar and just wanting to pull it right out because it doesn't look familiar.
Yeah. And how important, here we're having a virtual conversation, whereas maybe a lot of your trainings, perhaps you prefer to do them face-to-face live workshops. Do you think it makes much difference whether it's virtual or whether we're physically present?
That's a question I've been holding the last 4 months, because you're right. I've done my coaching on Zoom or Skype for years, but all my workshops have been live, in person before. And I've had to, like everyone, adapt to doing Zoom workshops. And so I would say an answer to, does it make a difference? I'd say yes and no. Yes, it does make a difference. It's undeniable that when you're in a room with people, there's a certain kind of field that can be created, and things that can happen that only can happen in person. And with that said, it doesn't mean that the learning or the transformation or the benefits or the interactivity and engagement still can't happen full on over Zoom or virtually. You can still reach the same objectives. So that doesn't, I don't think, make a difference. How you do it and how you design, or how I design, is slightly different than I did, but I still feel that virtual platforms can be powerfully transformative. Emergence can still for sure happen through that.
Right. And then the impact of this coronavirus pandemic, in terms of your presence, in what way have you felt the impact of it in transforming your presence?
Oh, great. Well, so like with most people, I had a whole slew of client workshops lined up for the spring that I'd worked very hard to get lined up, and every one of them got either canceled or postponed. And then I had to learn, and I had never done Zoom workshops before. So I had to learn over time. I hired a Zoom coach, and a couple different ones. And then I started working with colleagues as we were finding our way. We were exploring, and I started doing little labs with other colleagues who were in the same boat. We're trying, I learned this new thing, and here's how to do. And so it for sure impacted me in my business, and went right into discovery mode. That was it. Went into, okay, here's what it is, indefinite, don't know how long, what can I learn, what can I discover, what do I need to learn? And so I'm still in discovery mode, but now I've already been, moving some of the workshops online. I'm going to be offering a 9-week immersion program online. And it took me a few weeks to figure out, how do I bring that fully alive? And then by the time I was ready, then I was ready to put it out there. So I think it's impacted my work, just like many solopreneurs or entrepreneurs, and as well as so many others. And I think what I'm helping my clients do is what I did myself, is go into discovery mode. Okay, we're in an unknown. I don't know how, this is a new territory. How do I work it? How do I bring it to life? How do I make it work?
Yeah, and that's just an excellent example of the creative mindset, that you use crisis to create opportunities.
Yeah. Right. Don't they say the Chinese symbol is crisis and opportunity?
That's right.
And I feel that's what we're in right now. It's huge crisis. There's really tough things happening in the world, and it's huge opportunity. From an emergent space, it really is like, I feel like the world is pregnant and ready to be born. We're ready to midwife something new out there collectively, and each of us can just do our own creatively unique part. And that's been the focus of my own work for the last 20 years, is what's your unique what are you uniquely designed to do? Not just what you can do, because all of us can do much more than we're just designed to do. And then this is the time, I believe, for those of us in a position to ask ourselves, how can I help? Starting to look at, what are we designed to do? What is our unique set of gifts, skills, talents, experiences, drives, impulses, knowings, awarenesses, capacities? And then how can I form, shape, and structure that into something that can have impact in the world?
That's right. And it's a combination of the individual uniqueness and making sure that that fits in well with the bigger pattern as well.
Yeah, it's almost like, how can I bring my individual uniqueness to serve? So, we all have many avenues of creative expression, and like you said earlier, your painting or the arts is one type of avenue. For other people, it's creating businesses or missions or services or nonprofits. So given what the world needs, how do I bring my creatively unique self, which includes experiences, gifts, skills, talents, all of that, to help meet those needs?
Yes. And for me, I just love creating conversations, because I believe that through conversations, we gain insights, we think things that we might not have thought otherwise. So it's a form of communicative action, as Habermas says. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've been following since we talked a couple years ago. I'm following what you're doing, and it's lovely. I think that is part of your gift, is that you create these conversations, and that's part of it. And people can find what theirs to do, and it emerges, or different parts of it emerge over time. It's sort of like, looking at anything organic, like a tree, the branches emerge from the tree, and then the leaves emerge from the, and different flowers pop up. We all have access to a very deep, creative life force energy. And no matter what's going on in the world, with presence, we can learn to access it, partner with it, and create something out into the world.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you very much, Michelle. Just to summarize then, final points. So what, in just a couple of sentences, how would you sum up your work with Emergence?
I would say I help people birth something, their what's next, into the world. And I like to work with people that are feeling something stirring. They feel ready to give birth to something new. They may not be sure at all what it is. They may have fears with it. They may be in the unknown with it. But they want to structure something out in the world that would be of value and service to other people in some way. And that, whether they're an organization or individuals, and that's my sweet spot.
Excellent. I've really enjoyed my conversation with you, Michelle, and I look forward to speaking to you again very soon.
Likewise. Thanks.
Okay, bye for now.